Good evening, and welcome once again to Brush Up Your Shakespeare, where we make Shakespeare fun and easy, the way it was always meant to be. This is episode 12, and today we will be covering the most famous soliloquy in the English language, To Be or Not to Be, from Hamlet Act 3, Scene 1. In this soliloquy, Hamlet takes up the sensitive subject of suicide, but he does so as a mental exercise, examining whether he should kill himself as a question to be answered by balancing the pros and cons of the proposition. Hamlet considers the proposition not so much from the heart, though obviously it is his suffering, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, that brings him to this point. But he is clear that his main focus has to do with intellectual aspects of the issue, or as Hamlet puts it, in the mind. We have all heard the old saying, look before you leap. And it is just as likely we have heard the opposite advice given in another saying, he who hesitates is lost. We certainly should consider our actions before we take them. But on the other hand, if we consider too long, the opportunity may have fled. Leaving the question of what is the golden mean between these two sayings, Hamlet clearly falls heavily on the side of looking before you leap. He considers every angle and every possible permutation of many deep issues central to the human condition. And for this, we are grateful as an audience. But when it comes to fulfilling his vow to avenge his father's murder, remember, that's what this play is about. He is something less than Johnny on the spot. We will now go to the soliloquy itself and work our way through it with a few clarifications of terms, and then after that, I'll have a go at performing it for you. So here we have Hamlet Act 3, Scene 1, the to be or not to be soliloquy. So, of course, Hamlet is speaking, and it begins to be or not to be. Who doesn't know those lines? To be or not to be. It's as famous as the opening notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Dun, 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 dun. But for Shakespeare, it's to be or not to be, to exist or not to exist. That is the question. See, it's a mental proposition he's examining. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer or endure the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. When have we not felt similarly? I think it's part of the human condition, unless you live a charmed life, which most of us don't. Maybe none of us do. He goes on to die, to sleep, no more. In other words, to cease to exist, no more. And by a sleep, to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation or an end devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. There's the rub, and rub means difficulty. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, or in other words, when we have cast off mortality, must give us pause. Those dreams that might come must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life, or in other words, that allows adversity to be long lived. The respect is that we are cautious and careful and afraid of what might happen after death. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, and contumely is insult, the pangs of despised love? Is he referring to his own despised love for Ophelia, which was despised when she turned him down out of the blue and without any kind of explanation? Of course, we know it was because her father Polonius told her she had to. The law's delay. Yeah, even back then in Shakespeare's time, the idea was that justice delayed is justice denied. The law's delay. Who would put up with these things? The insolence of office. In other words, bureaucracy. Yeah, they had bureaucrats back then too, who were insolent. And the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes. That entire line there is a bit confusing. But what it means is the contempt that deserving people must patiently endure from less worthy persons, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin. Now, a bare bodkin is a bare dagger, an unsheathed dagger. And quietus there when he might settle his account, from the legal term quietus est, which means laid to rest in Latin, with an unsheathed dagger, i.e., killing himself. So when it says, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin, it means when he might settle his own account with an unsheathed dagger. Who would fardels bear? And fardels is an old word for burdens. Who would fardels bear? To grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne, and that bourne means border or boundary, from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will. And puzzles means bewilders the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. Thus, conscience, i.e., knowledge of right and wrong, though Hamlet is thinking more of punishments in this soliloquy. Thus, conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue or the natural color of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. And that entire line means unhealthily covered with the ashen tint of contemplation. And enterprises of great pitch and moment, that means of scope and importance. The folio has pith for pitch. So sometimes you'll see pith and moment. With this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. Regard here means consideration. So with this consideration, their currents turn awry. Other manuscripts have away and lose the name of action. So having gone over that now and explained a little bit about what some of the more difficult words and expressions mean in the soliloquy, let me give it a go in performing it for you. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep, to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with a pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment, with this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. Well, there is the soliloquy, the greatest piece of literature in Western civilization. It's an honor to be able to go into it a little bit with you and talk and describe it. It's an honor to perform it for you. Please hit like, please hit subscribe, please leave a comment below. Please share this podcast with your family and your friends. And please join us next time when once again we will brush up our Shakespeare. Thanks so much for watching. Good night, everyone.